One of the most amazing things is to see how people have been seduced by the magic and charm of Vietnam since time immemorial. Here is a most interesting example, that of the great Dr. Alexander Yersin, who discovered the cause of the bubonic plague. No small fearlessly out of a small grass hut he had built himself with only one assistant, just a few pieces of laboratory equipment. On June 20th of 1894, he made his mythical breakthrough and identified the bacteria which causes the bubonic plague. He rushed to Paris to present his findings and to manufacture the first anti-plague serum. That same year, he moved to the city of Nha Trang in southern Vietnam to begin manufacturing the serum. Dr. Yersin was an odd kind of a man. He was an austere, reclusive loner, and yet at the same time he loved ferocious tigers, rampaging elephants, hostile ethnic tribes. But that's not all. He was involved in developing innovative agricultural techniques, including bringing the rubber tree from Brazil to Vietnam. Little by little, he fell in love with Vietnam. In his weekly letter to his mother, he described the simplicity and the kindness of people and the sweet smiles of the children. And they in turn began to fall in love with him. They loved him for his compassion, for his affection, for his sincere caring. He provided free medical services to the community at a time when medical services were rare. Dr. Yersin was offered prestigious positions in Europe, but he refused them all. In one of his official trips to Paris, he wrote in his diaries,